Many fans are waiting for a legitimate fight between two undefeated fighters of the welterweight division, Shavkat Rakhmonov and Khamzat Chimaev. Both could meet in a welterweight title challenger bout. Hello fighters. This is World of MMA channel. In this video I will give a prediction on a potential fight between Khamzat Chimaev and Shavkat Rakhmonov. But before you start the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and put a like so as not to miss the next videos. Here we go. Khamzat Chimaev stormed into the UFC. In recent history, since the promotion moved away from one-day tournaments, no one has managed to get 2 wins in 10 days. And not just any victory, but 2 bright and early victories. And what's even more amazing is the special attitude of Dana White, who doesn't even deny it. The UFC boss has confirmed it repeatedly. Khamzat, who was born in the Chechen Republic, moved to Sweden when he was 19 and fights for the Scandinavians. But back to MMA. After his bright debut, Boers got Gerald Meerschaert, but before that fight the next one against the famous Damian Maia was already being discussed. The Brazilian was the 7th ranked fighter of the time. And beating him could make Khamzat even more popular. The Swede hardly needed a hype, because he is already well known to MMA fans after his outstanding debut. But a victory over an eminent opponent is another matter, because Chimaev's first 2 opponents in the UFC had only 1 victory under their belt. Meerschaert, Chimaev won by 1 punch in fact, and many said that Gerald was another sack. Tell that to Makhmud Muradov, whom the American strangled, interrupting the Uzbek fighter's streak of 14 wins. Khamzat never got the fight with Maia. He got coronavirus, recovered for a long time and even announced the end of his career. It's a shame, because at that time it was already announced his fight against Leon Edwards. A victory over which would have practically guaranteed Boers a title shot. We had to start all over again, but in 3 fights Chimaev made such a strong statement that after more than a year of downtime, Boers got an opponent from the 11th ranked welterweight division. Khamzat didn't dominate Jean Liang, he outright humiliated him. Caught him, carried him to the goal, while conversing with White, beat him and choked him. Once again without missing a beat. Many had talked about an aura of invulnerability before, but after the fight against the Chinese, that talk intensified. In April last year, Khamzat faced former title challenger and at the time fighter ranked number 2 in the division, Gilbert Burns. Chimaev missed more punches than he had in his entire career, exchanged a lot of punches with his opponent, fell, and completely backed away from the game plan. But most importantly, Boers showed his spirit, and 15 minutes later he scored his first career win by decision. Having beaten Burns, Khamzat had to go into the fight against Stockton gangster Nate Diaz. The fight was supposed to be at welterweight, but Khamzat was unable to make the weight due to his doctor forbidding him to raise the remaining pounds. As a result, Diaz refused to fight Chimaev, and experienced welterweight Kevin Holland came out against the Chechen. But this fight was held at intermediate weight. Khamzat started the fight with a struggle and again finished it in the first round by strangling Holland. Shavkat Rakhmonov, with a record of 12-0 all straight and as M-1 Global Champion, signed with the UFC. In his debut he was given the experienced veteran Alex Oliveira. Shavkat easily choked the Brazilian in the first round. After that fight, he is given another Brazilian veteran, Michel Prazeres, who once defeated Gilbert Burns. The fight lasted 2 rounds, where Shavkat dominated his opponent and forced a tap in the second round. He was then challenged by Guyana fighter Carlston Harris, who was famous for his knockouts and was unbeaten in the UFC. Rakhmonov accepted the challenge and they met at the UFC Fight Night tournament. Shavkat knocked out his opponent in the first round and earned the bonus for the best performance of the night, thus making it into the top 15 welterweight division. Shavkat's next opponent was the top-ranked Neil Magny, the record holder for wins in this division. Shavkat disarmed his opponent for 2 rounds and won the second round by choke. In his last fight he faced the tough knockout Jeff Neal and won by submission in a spectacular fight. Now Shavkat is on a 17-fight winning streak, all of them early. It's amazing. Let's start with the wrestling, and this is where Khamzat can start to build his game, as that's where he likes to end his fights. Kevin Holland and many other UFC fighters have been hurt by the Chechen fighters' wrestling. Khamzat has always had that trump card in his pocket and uses it in every fight. But that's if you don't count the fight with Burns. From the very beginning of the round, Khamzat presses you against the cage, and then with an amplitude throw throws you down, or drags you across the octagon to his corner. It's happened before in Khamzat's practice, but in this fight it won't be as easy as it seems. His opponent is not bad at wrestling either. Rakhmonov has some skills on the ground, which we'll talk about later. So Chimaev has to prepare with full dedication and understand in what situations it's better to transfer. Rakhmonov will definitely be stronger than many of the opponents Khamzat fought against. At least, I think he'll be superior to Gilbert. Now comes to Rakhmonov's wrestling skills, and as I have already noted, he can wrestle, get down and sabotage as well. You don't have to go far to find an example. Just remember his last fight, where he saw an opportunity, slammed the lock on the American's neck and forced him to tap just 1 minute before the end of the fight. He also subbed a pretty good jitser named Alex Pereira, who was given a good chance against Shavkat in the fight. But he ruined his plans for tonight. So what can we say about the outcome? It's not going to be easy to choose a favorite here. Both fighters have a good command of both aspects of the game. But I will still give preference to Khamzat, because his task is almost always to wrestle. Only wrestling and nothing more. Rakhmonov is often used to stand-up fights and does not use a ground fighting very often. Let's move on to Shavkat Rakhmonov's striking technique, who in the last fight showed all the beauty of his boxing and the ability to work on the hands. Shavkat showed a lot of things, but I will note only the most important factors. The first is the ability to hold his punches. No matter how many punches Jeff landed to Rakhmonov's head, he held everything. We also saw that he can work with elite-level fighters. He was much better than the American that night, you could tell. Neil kept trying to get close to his opponent, but Shavkat stopped him every time with a good counterpunch. Shavkat's picks also worked well against Jeff. In general, all the preparations that the Kazakh used in his past fights passed without any problems, and in this one Rakhmonov showed that he is a really dangerous representative of the striking team. How many knockouts he had before this fight is a serious statement. Now let's move on. What can you say about Khamzat's striking? As I've said more than once, Chimaev has no base in his hands. He can't box well. What can you do? But God gave him an excellent power of punch. If you don't believe me, you can watch his fight against Ikram Aliskerov and Gerald Mershert. Chimaev's power was clearly shown there. But as I said before, Chimaev is not so strong in boxing technique. We could see it in his fight against Gilbert, who had no problem getting away from Khamzat and counterattacking twice as hard. So he has to be very careful in the stand-up against Shavkat. He must be aware of the fact that in this fight the stand-up will not be on his side. If he refuses to take that factor into account, the night may be sad for Chimaev. After all, he is a wrestler by base with a good punch, but not by any means a boxer, so I will choose Rakhmonov as the favorite, who is above the mountains compared to Chimaev. I think Shavkat Rakhmonov will win this fight by decision of the judges. He will be able to stop all the takedowns from Khamzat and recite him in the stand-up. What do you think, my friends? Write your opinion in the comments. Bye everyone.